Hi everyone, it's Katrina. Some discoveries are so outrageous, so out of this world that not even the brightest minds can figure them out. But we're going to try. At least I'll tell you about them since this is Origins Explained. Then be sure to let me know what you think. Today I'll be investigating a giant that time forgot, a mysterious creature sighting in the ancient world, and other ancient and old mysteries that will keep you up at night. Let's go exploring and see what's out there. The giant that never got to stand. Forget the Acropolis, forget Santorini's sunsets. The real showstopper on the Greek island of Naxos is a colossal enigma. Tucked away on the sun-bleached cliffs just past the sleepy village of Apollonas lies a fallen titan. It isn't Cronus or Gaia or Atlas or any of the other famed Greek titans. It's an ancient rock star who never got to take the stage. He's not fenced off. He's not labeled with flashing signs or encased in bulletproof glass. In fact, tourists can and often do climb all over his giant stone torso like he's some kind of mythological jungle gym. Who is this stone behemoth? You can call him the Koros of Apollonius, or if you'd prefer, the Colossus of Dionysus. That one might be easier to remember. The stone titan is Greece's greatest unfinished project. Stretching out at a chill 35 feet, or roughly 2 minivans end to end, this ancient statue looks like it was halfway to becoming a deity and just fell asleep permanently. At first glance, you might think he's a cousin of those Easter Island moai. He's got the classic blank stare, no pants, and a very mysterious aura. But this stone figure was carved not in the South Pacific, but in Greece, from Naxian marble, which was the creme de la creme of ancient sculpting stone, known for its dazzling white shine and massive crystal structure. The statue lies on its back like a dude who fainted mid-yoga class, arms still at his sides, beard beginning to take form, legs solid and symmetrical, but who the heck is he? Early archaeologists thought the statue was a tribute to Apollo, god of the sun, music, and generally being fabulous. It makes sense since the town is named Apollonius after Apollo. But in the 1930s, someone took a closer look and said, wait a minute, this guy's got a beard. And who didn't have a beard? Apollo. But you know who did have a beard? Dionysus, the wine-loving party king with fabulous facial hair. This unfinished masterpiece was likely meant to be the god of wine, theater, pleasure, and what we now call brunch vibes. However, it's still just a guess, as is the statue's origin. Some historians suspect the stone titan was carved somewhere between the 8th and 6th centuries BC, in the middle of Greece's Archaic period. It was a time when art, politics, and technology were emerging from the Greek Dark Ages like a disco ball rising from a fog machine. It was also an era of statue making. The Greeks were obsessed with naked marble dudes whose abs were always on point. Ancient sculptors used iron chisels, hammers, and wedges, slicing into solid stone like Michelangelo with a vengeance. Yet despite all that effort, this statue was never finished. The Colossus of Dionysus, supersized and mythologically endorsed, was abandoned like a kid's art project the day before it's due. Why did they leave it though? Was the artist ghosted by his sponsor? Did the marble crack and ruin the piece? Did the project manager say, let's circle back, and never did? No one knows, and that's part of what makes the Colossus so exciting. It's still lying in the same place all these years later, all 2,800 years later. He's a story mid-sentence, a giant half-born from stone, stuck between the intentions of ancient artisans and the eroding hand of time. You know I had to add some Greek drama to this. He represents not just what the ancient Greeks accomplished, but what they almost accomplished. Now, do you think it's about time someone finished him off? Let's get the Titan cleaned up, polished, and on his own 2 feet for the first time in nearly 3,000 years. Who's with me, huh? Did humans have longer lifespans? Are you planning to live to 100 and join the Centenarian Club? Or would you rather live to be 900 and join the Methuselah Club? Because if the Bible is telling the truth, human beings used to have a much, much longer lifespan. What the heck happened to us? One of the biggest mysteries of our time is the long lives of the biblical patriarchs. It's something science has dismissed as complete fiction. But there are some outlying scholars who trust the Bible and say that living to 900 is plausible. Let's hear it from the horse's mouth first. According to the Bible, Adam clocked out at 930 years old. Noah hit 950, and Methuselah held the all-time life high score at 969. These ancient guys were celebrating their 800th birthdays with wine, goat cheese, and grandkids older than you are. And it wasn't just biblical lore giving us these ages. Ancient Sumerian texts also listed kings ruling for 30,000 years, which is either an incredibly long reign or the worst case of writers' embellishment in history. All over the globe, ancient cultures told stories of certain men who lived to be more than just ancient. And yes, it was almost always just men. The longest living women noted in scripture are just three: Abraham's wife, Isaac's wife, and Moses' sister too. Abraham's wife Sarah lived to be 127. Isaac's wife Rebecca lived to about 120. And Moses' sister Miriam lived to be 125. That's a far cry from 900. Why this big discrepancy between men and women? Any thoughts? Ready for some controversy? Modern researchers have cooked up some theories to make sense of these outrageous lifespans. But if you're Catholic, you're not gonna like it. One popular theory says ancient people had a different concept of time. Maybe when the Bible says years, it really means lunar months. If a year means a month, then Adam didn't die at 930. Instead, he died at 77. That sounds more realistic, right? Could it be that some scribe mistook month for year and has been confusing everyone for the last 20 centuries? Maybe, but when you do the math, this explanation falls apart faster than your New Year's resolution. When you break down the numbers the Bible gives us for when Adam had his kids, he would have fathered his son at age 11. The prophet Enoch would have been 5 when he had his son Methuselah. At first glance, this whole year is a month theory sounds pretty good, but there are too many flaws. Carol A. Hill, writing for Perspectives on Science and Christian Faith, dove deep into these mental gymnastics and found that nothing adds up. You can multiply, divide, and square root the numbers all you want. They still come out weird. In other words, there was no mistake. Adam lived to be 930 years old, and that's that. And what about those Sumerians with their even crazier lifespans? Dwight Young from Brandeis University noticed something uncanny in the Sumerian king list. Many of the listed lifespans are perfect square numbers, like these. It's possible the Sumerians used square numbers as some sort of symbolism. I mean, 30,000 years? Dracula didn't even live that long. Some scholars, like Paul Hoskisson and Arthur Mendez, think people did live longer. Mendez even suggested the decline in longevity after the biblical flood matches the biological decay seen in radiation exposure. His theory is that the environment changed post-flood, tanking human lifespans. Do you see why this is such a huge mystery? It isn't just about what the Bible says. It's about cold, hard facts from multiple historical sources around the globe that all line up. Scientists wouldn't even consider the possibility if it was just the Bible. But long lives are found in other cultures too, like in China, where supercentenarians were practically local celebrities. According to Taoist lore and historical records, Hui Wenzi of the Qin dynasty lived to 300. Hui Zhao, a Han dynasty monk, hit 290, while Li Qingyuan, herbalist and Taoist legend, allegedly made it to 250. Even in more modern times, Lo Mingshan, a traditional Chinese medicine doctor, reportedly lived to be 124, which is seriously impressive. Hopefully I make it to be that old. Maybe by then they can put my brain in a robot body. Cool, right? It seems like in China, just like in the West, human lifespans went from wow to meh, from 300 years to less than 100. Could something really have poisoned the well of age, so to speak? Will humans learn to recapture our lost longevity one day? Let me know what you think in the comments. And now for a quick break because it's shout-out time. I want to give a big thank you to Elle Marie and Mark Robinson for supporting this channel. We wouldn't be here without you guys. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like this. The Horned Serpent from Hell. Prepare to rethink history and monsters. In the sun-scorched heart of South Africa, on a lonely stone wall brushed by centuries of wind and whispers, a mysterious creature sprawls across the surface. It's a painted creature, a hulking, tusked beast frozen in ochre and myth. Welcome to the case of the Horned Serpent, where archaeology, folklore, and paleontology smash into each other like fossil-fueled bumper cars. The idea of a horned serpent isn't new. It's haunted legends, fired up folklore, and slithered through the cultural memory of indigenous people for generations. All around the globe, cultures were obsessed with serpents, and sometimes they had horns. Although sometimes the snakes had feathers, like with the feathered serpent in Mesoamerican cultures. There was the serpent in the Garden of Eden, and in Native American cultures, you can't walk 10 feet without tripping over pottery painted with images of horned serpents. It's generally thought that no such animal actually existed. Scientists have never found evidence that a real horned serpent was slithering around the world. Until now. Scientists stumbled across a 200-year-old rock painting in the Karoo Basin of South Africa. According to Dr. Julian Benoit, the painting shows a tusked animal with a distinctly downward curve, a feature that matches absolutely nothing in the African wilds today. In fact, the only animal this painted creature slightly resembles is a dicynodont, which went extinct around 150 to 200 million years ago. Either someone brought a time-traveling paleontologist to the 1800s, or the sand people who carved this image knew something that modern science is missing. The first formal scientific description of an extinct dicynodont came out in 1845. This painting dates to around 1821. It isn't ancient, but it's still pretty old. The sand seemed to have painted the closest thing to a horned serpent that ever lived before science even knew it was a thing. So how do you explain that? Coincidence? Pure imagination? A crystal ball? The thing about the sand is that they primarily drew things that they saw with their own eyes. Their spiritual world teemed with creatures based on real animals, some still alive and others extinct. The San have lived in Africa for countless generations, so they've seen some stuff. What this suggests is that the horned serpent was a real animal. Benoit believes the horned serpent might have been a creature larger than elephants and heavier than hippos, described by the San in legends as great monstrous brutes. Benoit admits it's still just speculation. A painting doesn't prove the horned serpent existed, but it does suggest a stunning possibility. And that possibility is that an ancient culture, without formal science or carbon dating, saw the past in stone and brought it to life. Maybe the San didn't live alongside a horned lizard, aka a dinosaur, but they may have found its fossils and recreated it, like a sweaty paleontologist laboring in the back room of the Smithsonian. Either that, or like our creationist friends believe, humans and dinosaurs lived alongside each other in pre-flood days. And they were so terrified of the horned serpent that they still drew pictures of it in the 1800s. The false doors of ancient Egypt. In the desert of Saqqara, where the stones whisper the names of pharaohs and every grain of sand could hide a dynasty, archaeologists came face to face with what looked like a dead end. It was a false door, a slab in a tomb where time had folded in on itself. But this door wasn't fake at all. Behind this 14-foot-tall monolith of pink granite was a forgotten secret. Royalty, statues, a lost prince, history unraveling by the second. Let me back up a bit now that I've got you hooked. In dozens, hundreds, maybe even thousands of temples and tombs and other structures across Egypt, there are false doors. These are doorways to nowhere carved into walls and recesses. They look like spiritual portals and were meant to be doorways where souls could move to and from the afterlife. This is the first time a false door has proven to be a real door. It has archaeologists wondering how many hidden doors and how many tombs they may have missed over the last 200 years of Egyptology. The false door was found in a nondescript ruin at the end of what looked like a dead-end passage. Inscribed on the door is the prince's name and titles. He was Prince Userefri, son of King Userkaf. He was the founder of Egypt's 5th dynasty around the 25th century BC. Now that's old. The pyramids were still getting Yelp reviews from their neighbors in Nubia back then. Once they realized the false door was a real door, archaeologists were practically tripping over each other to open the thing. It was doubly exciting because, according to Professor Ronald Leprohan at the University of Toronto, nobody even knew that Prince Userefre existed. He is a brand new character in Egyptian history. Inside his hidden tomb, archaeologists found a red granite offering table and statues of King Djoser, his wife, and his 10 daughters. Wait, King Djoser? What were his statues doing in the tomb of Prince Userefre? Was this some kind of bizarre family reunion? Experts think the tomb was reused because they also found statue heads of Prince Userefre's multiple wives. There was a lot going on in here. If only the walls could talk. To be honest though, the whole place is a mystery. And now that a tomb has been found on the other side of a false door, archaeologists need to go back and look at the other false doors throughout Egypt. We could be on the verge here of a massive multi-tomb discovery unlike anything seen in history. I'll be sure to fill you in on each new discovery on Origins Explained, so be sure to subscribe. Myths of Megaliths. In the Lebanese hills, in a place called Baalbek, there sits a temple so oversized, so jaw-droppingly extra, it makes the pyramids look like children's toys. This is the Temple of Jupiter, 2,000 years old, packed with mystery and perched on 3 stone blocks so massive you would need an army of mastodons to lift them. Let me start with some perspective. Stonehenge's biggest stone weighs about 25 tons. The blocks at Baalbek try 1,000 tons. One was even found weighing 1,650 tons, which is something like 3 Boeing 747s. Can you explain to me how an ancient civilization carved such enormous building blocks? Because I'm out of guesses. Discovered in a quarry just a stone's throw from the temple, the 1,650-ton megalith was found by a team from the German Archaeological Institute, working with Janine Abdul-Masih from Lebanese University. They unearthed what is now the undisputed heavyweight champion of ancient stonework. But they are still scratching their heads because the dang thing makes no sense. Nobody knows who ordered it, why it was carved, or why it was left behind like a gym bro who bit off more than he could lift. If you've ever abandoned furniture halfway up a staircase and just lived with it there, you understand this perfectly. Let's take a closer look at the site itself. Like I already said, the Temple of Jupiter is in the city of Baalbek. It gets its name from Baal, the Phoenician god of storms. When the Greeks took Baalbek over, they renamed it Heliopolis, or City of the Sun. What's crazy is that there are no historical blueprints that even mention the enormous megalith. It doesn't seem to fit into any standing structures. It's just a random block with no place to call home, and no one knows why it's there. But boy, oh boy, are there guesses! Some say that Cain built it to hide from God's wrath. Others say Nimrod ordered it as part of a failed Tower of Babel 2.0. Another theory is that King Solomon hired jinns, as in genies, to build it for the Queen of Sheba. But the jinns went on strike, and Sheba's grand temple was never constructed. Do you like any of these theories? Scottish traveler David Urquhart visited the site in 1860, took one look, and claimed Noah's generation built it before the flood. David was convinced that the stone wasn't even connected to Baalbek or the Temple of Jupiter. He believed it was the only surviving piece of a much larger, much more impressive antediluvian monument. And then there are the modern experts like Marguerite van Es from the German Archaeological Institute. Marguerite is trying to demystify Baalbek using tools like ground surveys and logic. Her team's current theory is that the blocks were split from natural rock layers and dragged into place using capstans. Capstans were giant human-powered winches. Even with the biggest winch in the world, could primitive humans have dragged a stone block of almost 2,000 tons? Don't look at me. I don't have the answer. At the end of the day, whether you believe the stone was built by the Romans with ropes, giants with mastodons, or cosmic beings who didn't need work permits, the mystery remains unsolved. You're welcome. A fantasy crown for the ages. Some people have old socks under their bed, and others have a stash of chocolate, maybe some clothes. Maybe you keep all your darkest secrets down there. But in Somerset, England, one unsuspecting retiree discovered a solid gold crown from ancient Greece under his bed. It was stuffed in newspaper inside a dusty cardboard box, and it was fit for a king. The story takes us to 2016. Our protagonist, who's kept his name out of the headlines, stumbled upon a box he'd inherited from his globe-trotting grandfather. The man had been sitting on this mystery stash for nearly a decade, tucked away under his bed like forgotten Christmas wrapping paper. His father had given him the box, but he never bothered to check what was in it. Let this be a lesson to you all to open every box you ever get. You never know when there will be gold inside. In this particular box, there was a gold wreath-style crown, roughly 2,300 years old. It was made of pure gold and styled with delicate leaves, and it had been sitting under this guy's bed like a crusty sock. Guess how much it's worth? Go ahead, guess. If you said $100,000, go higher. When the man finally brought the gold crown to Dukes of Dorchester for appraisal, specialist Guy Schwinge had a full-on history-induced heart palpitation. When the owner pulled the gold wreath from a tatty cardboard box, my heart missed a beat, he said. The crown is worth over $200,000. Now that's a decent nest egg. Guy Schwinge identified it as being Hellenistic, dating to the era following the death of Alexander the Great in 323 BC. It was a time when Greek culture was spreading faster than Marvel movie spoilers on Twitter. Measuring 8 inches across and weighing around 100 grams, the crown was crafted to resemble branches of laurel, olive, oak, or myrtle, symbols of victory, peace, wisdom, and virtue. In ancient Greece, you didn't wear one of these for fun. This was aristocratic-level bling, usually worn during ceremonies or offered to the gods. Which begs the question, how did Grandpa get his hands on it? The man who found the crown suspects his grandfather may have picked it up while adventuring around the northwest frontier in the 1940s or 50s, an area once conquered by Alexander the Great. Unfortunately, the crown came with no documents, no receipts, not even a dusty Made in Thessaloniki label, just some dirt and a whole lot of mystery. I can't even really tell you what happened to the crown. There are no records of it being auctioned, so it may have been privately sold. Or it might have gone right back under our nameless hero's bed, where someone else will find it in a few years. What would you do with your crown? Wear it around the house or put a down payment on a house? Pyramid eaten by the jungle. Deep in the heart of Savaii, the largest island in Samoa, where dense jungle vines twist like nature's barbed wire, lies a forgotten giant. I'm talking about a colossal, 8-pointed stone structure that's been hiding more secrets than that weird Tupperware container under your cousin's bed. It's called the Pulemale Mound, and it's the biggest and oldest man-made monument in all of Polynesia, and potentially one of the most misunderstood. Though, let me be clear, calling it a mound is like calling the Great Wall of China a fence. At 40 feet tall with a base the size of a small shopping mall, Pulemale is often labeled a pyramid. It has all the trademark characteristics of a pyramid, but with a flat top. It's got that classic Aztec party platform plateau instead of the Egyptian point. It's also currently being swallowed by the jungle, and no one really knows who built it or when. One theory is that construction began around 1,000 years ago. The pyramid was constructed as a sacred ceremonial site or a burial platform, maybe even a military lookout post or an ancient alien landing pad. The possibilities are endless. To add to the mystery, there are about 80 similar, albeit a bit smaller mounds scattered throughout the area. No one knows who or how or why any of them were built. Samoa is a low-key archaeological enigma. Luckily, archaeologists are working to crack the case. In recent years, scientists turned to laser mapping LiDAR technology, a new method of stripping away the trees and vines virtually, revealing what lies beneath. When they used laser scans in Samoa, they found a vast pre-colonial settlement sprawling beneath and around the Pulemale Mound. They identified roads, platforms, terraces, the works. Suddenly, Pulemale didn't look like a random structure. It looked like the epicenter of a massive, organized civilization. This discovery throws a Molotov cocktail into the dusty textbooks of Samoan colonial history. Previously, it was assumed that Samoa's population before European contact in 1722 was small and scattered. But the new evidence suggests something far more complex. There was a thriving, densely populated society with impressive engineering and urban planning long before the first colonial boots hit the shore. But how long ago? Were people building cities in Samoa 10,000 years ago? 5,000 years ago? How far back does Jungle Pyramid's history take us? The mummy no one will open. In the dusty tombs of the Valley of the Kings, where pharaohs once rested under golden masks and curses waited like booby traps, lies a mummy so unique, so bizarre, that no one has dared to unwrap it. Seriously, it's like archaeologists are scared of this guy who has been dead for 2,000 years. They won't unwrap him, like they're worried he's got anthrax in his linens. The name of this spooky individual is Bashiri. His nickname is a lot cooler though. They call him the Untouchable One. And for good reason. Bashiri was discovered in 1919, 3 years before King Tut. Even though Bashiri was found first, and by the same guy, Howard Carter, he barely made the footnotes of global papers. Why? Maybe it was the timing. Maybe it was the lack of golden furniture in his tomb. Or maybe it was because no one had any idea what to do with a mummy wrapped like a sacred Rubik's Cube. Bashiri isn't your average mummy in linen. His face is wrapped in an intricate pyramid-like pattern, a geometric marvel so precise it looks like it was designed by a divine architect with OCD. The technique used to wrap Bashiri is totally unique, and I mean it. No other mummy in the world is wrapped like this. He's one of one. The archaeological unicorn of the mummification world. And that's why no one's touched him. Because to unwrap Bashiri would be to destroy the very thing that makes him irreplaceable. Thankfully, we're living in the 21st century. These days, you don't need to unwrap a mummy to meet him. With CT scans and X-rays, researchers can peek beneath the fabric without disturbing a single thread. And that's exactly what they recently did with our buddy Bashiri. Looking under the surface revealed that Bashiri's burial shroud is decorated with scenes of Egyptian gods like Isis, Nephthys, and Anubis, along with symbols of protection like the 4 sons of Horus. Whoever this guy was, he was important. Important enough to be wrapped up like a human origami. Important enough for his wrappings to have been expertly covered in gold. Still, his exact identity is a mystery. Maybe he was a high priest with political power. Maybe Bashiri was a ritual specialist. Maybe a king that no one has ever heard of. Whatever the truth, it's still hidden beneath layers of bandages. Archaeologists have done all they can without violating his mummy. I think we have to let this one go. Not every mystery is meant to be solved. What would be the fun in that? The new discovery of hobbit humans. Hobbits are real, but they don't live in the Shire. They used to live in the wild, jungled heart of the island of Flores, Indonesia, where Komodo dragons roam and legends breathe through volcanic air. This is one of the coolest mysteries anthropologists have been investigating lately. It began 20 years ago, when researchers stumbled upon fossilized remains of a tiny early human species. They named it Homo floresiensis, and news of their existence took the world by storm. But mostly, it was exciting for fans of Lord of the Rings. Homo floresiensis was affectionately dubbed the Hobbit species because they were only 3.5 foot tall. There was a whole race of people, just like Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, Denisovans, but they were the size of hobbits. Crazy, but true. And it's getting crazier thanks to a new, even smaller species of hobbit that's been found. A new study published in Nature Communications has announced that the ancestors of these hobbits were even smaller. The study analyzed newly unearthed fossils from a site called Matamenge. It's about 45 miles east of the original hobbit hotspot. The 700,000-year-old upper arm bone that they uncovered is now officially the tiniest hominin upper arm bone on Earth. In a fossil record that includes everything from the towering Homo erectus to our Neanderthal gym buddies, this bone is the smallest. If Homo floresiensis was the fun-sized version of early humans, then their ancestors were evolution's pocket edition, around 2.4 inches shorter than the hobbits themselves. They were practically elves at this point. Scientists are struggling to figure out where these little folks came from. Did they shrink down from the taller, globe-trotting Homo erectus? Or did they descend from an even more primitive human species, possibly one even smaller? The scientific team is leaning toward the island effect theory, suggesting that a band of Homo erectus wound up stranded on Flores about 1 million years ago. Then they gradually shrank due to the harsh realities of island life, such as limited resources, isolation, and no access to protein shakes. The giant of Iran. Forget hobbits now, it's giant time. In the rugged hills of Loristan, a region in western Iran steeped in myth and ancient empire, archaeologists may have just uncovered something from the pages of the Old Testament, the skeletal remains of a giant. Leading the excavation, archaeologist Atta Hassanpour and his team unearthed a grave unlike any they'd ever seen. Inside was the skeleton of an elderly man who was around 7 feet tall. In a world of NBA superstars and Scandinavians who drink way too much milk, 7 feet tall isn't that impressive. But in the ancient world, he would have stood heads taller than everyone around him. The burial site, covered with a massive stone slab and lined with 4 clay walls, dates to the Sasanian Empire, which ruled Persia from 224 to 651 AD, just before the Islamic Caliphate swept in. But it's the man's sheer size that has stunned the team. In a time when the average male height hovered around 5 feet 5 inches, this was a giant by every definition. Was he a normal man? An offspring of the Nephilim? Related to Goliath? His grave's elaborate construction and proximity to ceremonial ruins certainly hint at him being someone important, maybe even revered or feared. Archaeologists didn't find any artifacts that could point to a gigantic or biblical origin. They found some ornamented vessels, coins, and stamped ceramics, all pretty standard things for a grave that's almost 2,000 years old. What they did find were a pair of massive stone columns, believed to be remnants of an ancient ceremonial hall. The columns are big enough to make me think the hall was built for people a lot taller than 5'5".
Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed.
Ancient astronomers. The ancient Babylonians were not the only ones who had advanced secret knowledge. There were a lot of cultures around the world that had shockingly sophisticated awareness of the stars. These ancient astronomers all seemed to start observing the cosmos at around the same time, almost as if they were motivated by the same thing. Ancient tablets from Mesopotamia have been found with carved images of the position of the planets in the sky. This was a rather impressive thing to do, considering they didn't even have telescopes at the time. Even more amazing is that a lot of ancient structures were built to be aligned directly with the cardinal directions, north, east, south, and west. Either that, or they were made to point directly at celestial bodies. For example, Stonehenge was built as a way to predict eclipses. Or at least scientists agree that that was one of its many astronomical functions. Then there's the Great Pyramid of Egypt, a perfect example of ancient astronomy so extreme it doesn't make sense. The very top of the pyramid was once covered in a capstone. This stone was either pure white or made out of solid gold. Whatever it was made out of, it was aligned within 1/15 of a degree in the direction of the Earth's very own rotation. How the Egyptians could have possibly known about the Earth's rotation is baffling. Many have speculated that the Egyptians and other advanced astronomers of the ancient world were given knowledge of the universe they couldn't possibly have learned alone. Or, more likely, is that ancient people were a lot more intelligent than we give them credit for. Babylonian mathematicians. Scientists just can't seem to figure out how ancient Babylonians were such brilliant mathematicians. In 2017, researchers in Australia finished investigating an ancient clay tablet from 3,700 years ago. The tablet shows what is believed to be the oldest trigonometric table in existence. It also appears to be the most accurate, showing an almost unbelievable level of mathematical intelligence. The tablet would have allowed ancient architects and engineers to construct palaces and temples with extreme precision. They also would have been able to create things like canals, aqueducts, and other engineering marvels using expert math. The new research done in Australia indisputably shows that the Babylonians reached mathematical heights that wouldn't be achieved by the Greeks for another 1,000 years. The tablet they were researching is known as Plimpton 322, which was uncovered in Iraq by Edgar Banks in the early 1900s. Edgar was the antiquities dealer and archaeologist whom Indiana Jones was based on. The tablet shows 4 columns and 15 rows of numbers, and it has continued to puzzle scientists since it was found. According to Dr. Daniel Mansfield from the School of Mathematics and Statistics at the University of South Wales, the numbers on the tablet are arranged in a precise pattern called Pythagorean triples. This series of numbers is named after the famous Greek mathematician Pythagoras, though we now know that he wasn't the one who originally came up with the formula. The tablet itself isn't that mysterious. It's a tool for understanding ratios of right-angled triangles using advanced trigonometry. The real mystery that nobody can solve is how the Babylonians figured out such an advanced form of math. Even crazier is that they created this tablet about 200 years before they invented the wheel. The Nazca lines. The Nazca culture of ancient Peru created one of the greatest collections of geoglyphs in the world 2,000 years ago. A little over 200 miles from the capital of Lima, just outside the modern town of Nazca, there are over 800 perfectly straight lines drawn in the sand. There are also 300 strange geometric patterns and 70 biomorphic designs, things like animals and plants. Some of the lines are up to 30 miles long, while many of the figures are longer than the Empire State Building is tall, the longest of them being 1,200 feet. Even more shocking is that the only way to see these creations is from above. You have to be flying over the desert if you want to see the Nazca lines. Otherwise, you wouldn't even know you were walking through a massive drawing of a monkey. There are a lot of different shapes. There's a giant spider, a monkey, a lizard, and a duck. There are also lots of plants drawn in the sand as well, like trees and flowers, but there is one geoglyph in particular that scientists have a difficult time accepting. It's nicknamed the astronaut because it seems to depict a humanoid figure dressed in a spacesuit. He also appears to be waving at the sky, as if he was drawn there to say hello to any friendly aliens who might be hovering in the atmosphere. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. The Pitoni Sky Stones. The Italian geologist Angelo Pitoni purchased a small collection of blue stones from a tribal chief in Sierra Leone in 1990. According to the Fula tribe, these stones came from extraterrestrial visitors from the sky. The stones were bright blue and veined with ribbons of white, so the geologist purchased them, even though the story behind them was a little crazy. When Angelo returned to Europe, he gave the stones to scientists to get them tested. Everyone was shocked when these stones didn't match any mineral known to science. In other words, these stones were made out of something completely unknown. Of course, they were mostly made of oxygen, with the usual amounts of carbon and calcium, but there was a third unidentified organic compound that scientists have never been able to identify. However, they did date the stones at being about 55,000 years old. But just how true is this story? Angelo Pitoni was a very real person. We even have photographs of him with the mysterious blue stones. But there isn't much information available about his life. He's been credited with all kinds of strange discoveries, and he's allegedly connected to the CIA. The stones themselves are just as mysterious. We have pictures of them, and they appear to be real, but the stones also seem to have been sold off to the highest bidders across the world. A gem dealer in Hong Kong was allegedly in possession of one in 2013. However, he refused to hand over even a fragment of his precious rock to be studied by scientists. Scorpion Men. In ancient Babylonian myths, there are strange beings called the Akrabuamelu. These were scorpion men, half scorpion and half man. They had the head, torso, and arms of a human, but their entire lower body was that of a gigantic scorpion. They were the Babylonian version of centaurs, but with scorpion parts instead of horse parts. You get it. Their existence dates back to the beginning of time. The earliest Babylonian legends speak of the creator god Tiamat summoning the Akrabuamelu to fight in a war against the younger gods following a dramatic betrayal by Tiamat's mate Apsu. Centuries later, we see a mention of the scorpion men again in the famous Epic of Gilgamesh. These freakish hybrids were charged with guarding the gates to Kurnugi, otherwise known as the Land of Darkness. The Akrabuamelu continued to evolve in stories told over the years. The Akkadians believed in scorpion men as well, saying they would terrify people for sport, and that they could kill a man simply by looking at him. This may just sound like a myth, but here's where things get weird. The Aztec also spoke of creatures that were part human and part scorpion. They were called Tzitzimime and were said to be the result of disgraced gods cast out of the sky. In other words, beings from other worlds that fell to Earth. It's easy to dismiss such creatures as nonsense, but there is no denying that they were viewed as real beings by two different cultures on opposite sides of the world. Two cultures who never even met one another, that we know of. Do you believe there could have once been giant scorpion men wandering around the planet? Let us know in the comments below, and while you're at it, be sure to hit that subscribe button and join us. The Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland is one of the strangest places on the planet. The causeway is made from over 40,000 interlocking columns. These columns look artificial, like they were made on purpose by people using advanced technology. But according to scientists, they were made by volcanic eruptions between 50 and 60 million years ago. The Giant's Causeway has been a UNESCO World Heritage Site since 1986, but long before that, it was a place of legend. The Irish believed the Giant's Causeway once stretched all the way from Northern Ireland to Scotland, and that it was used as a bridge by Finn McCool, a mythical warrior. Finn made the bridge himself so that he could reach his rival on the other side, a giant called Benandonner. But as the giants fought, the bridge shattered and was never put back together again. These days, the stories are generally accepted to be nothing but myths, and yet some have claimed to witness a massive door opening at the Giant's Causeway, one which leads inside the columns. It's most likely nothing, but it's certainly something that scientists can't explain. But there are those who believe the Giant's Causeway is more than just volcanic rock, and that the mysterious doorway leads to another world. Alaskan Mermaid. Inuit folklore speaks of a creature called Kalupiluit, a monster that's sort of like the boogeyman mixed with a disgusting merman or mermaid. The creature was said to kidnap children who misbehaved by snatching them from the shores of lakes and ponds. If the Kalupiluit found a child alone, it would drown them. The mythical monster was said to live in these bodies of water. It was a humanoid being, sometimes resembling a feminine creature. However, other times it was described as a more masculine creature with slimy green skin. It was the Inuit version of the evil mermaid, and some believe it could be real. The Kalupiluit supposedly resides in Alaska and the Northern Territories of Canada. One of its alleged homes happens to be in the Bermuda Triangle of Alaska. This is a place where an estimated 16,000 people have vanished since 1988. It's a huge chunk of wilderness, larger than most states in the United States, and yet almost nobody lives there. But despite having very few residents, the missing person rate is roughly twice the national average. Scientists have never been able to explain all the mysterious disappearances here, but if you ask some people, they'll tell you the Kalupiluit is responsible. If the local legends are to be believed, the evil green mermaid is out there somewhere, drowning people who get lost and wander too close to the water. Circles of Stone. Despite being 6,000 miles apart, Japan and Britain have some surprising parallels. Even Ireland and China are connected through ancient archaeology. About 5,000 years ago, communities in England, Ireland, China, and Japan were building huge structures out of stone. They made elaborate stone circles and crafted unique ceramic containers. They even figured out how to master stone tools. In Japan, the ancient Jomon specialized in creating clay figurines known as dogu. These figurines were made between 14,000 and 400 BC and have been found buried at sites of prehistoric stone circles. Some people have even described the Dogu as alien figurines. This is because they look nothing like human beings. They seem to depict visitors wearing spacesuits, with huge bulky limbs and bulging eyes. Archaeologists claim the figures were representations of goddesses and spirits, but others say they were made in the likeness of visitors from the stars. On the other side of the world in Britain, people were building Stonehenge. It's a really strange coincidence that at the same time the Jomon began crafting their own stone circles and making figurines that looked like aliens, early Britons were doing the same things. It was also happening in nearby places, geographically speaking, like China and Ireland. There is a theory that says the reason for the similarities is that in both the East and the West, prehistoric people received the same mysterious visitors. The Hunt of the Unicorn. The Hunt of the Unicorn has nothing to do with child-murdering mermaids or mutant humans with scorpion tails. This is a very real series of 7 monumental tapestries. When put together, the Hunt of the Unicorn is considered one of the greatest artworks in human history. The tapestries show noblemen joined by their huntsmen and hounds slaying a unicorn. They first pursue the magical beast through the forest before killing it, and then they bring it back to the castle. But in the final tapestry, the unicorn is resurrected in a garden, where it appears to be fenced in by those who captured it. The mystery here is simple. Nobody knows who created the tapestries. We don't know who designed the panels or who weaved them, and we don't know who is depicted in the scenes. The first record of the tapestries is in 1680, although most historians believe they were likely created almost 200 years earlier in 1495, just a few years after Columbus discovered America. King Solomon's Mines. King Solomon of Israel was the son of King David in the Bible. Much like his father, Solomon was praised across the world for his wisdom and power, as well as the unbelievable fortune he amassed. Many historians agree that Solomon may have been the wealthiest man in the ancient world, but scientists have never been able to find the source of King Solomon's riches. It's a mystery that's still boggling researchers to this day. In the 19th century, author H. Rider Haggard came up with the idea that King Solomon established his own mines. According to Haggard, these mines were supposedly the source of his wealth, but they've been lost for thousands of years. About 50 years after Haggard, American archaeologist Nelson Gleck made the outrageous claim that he found King Solomon's mines. They were supposedly hidden in the Great Rift Valley near the border of Israel and Jordan. They weren't full of gold, but instead were used for the smelting of copper. Nelson claimed it was copper that made King Solomon so rich. But when archaeological evidence couldn't be connected to biblical accounts, researchers began to dismiss Nelson's claims. Archaeologists are still trying to find the location of the mines that made King Solomon rich. We know there are highly organized mining sites spread throughout much of the Near East and Mideast, and that the Egyptians built lots of mines as well. Archaeologists just can't find the ones that made King Solomon the wealthiest man alive 3,000 years ago. Thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you soon. Bye!